Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Peaceful Solution Character Education Certification course. Everyone in the auditorium can be seated. Welcome all of you that are online. Thank you for joining us once again. We're picking up here in the responsibility unit. Hopefully everybody's downloaded their teacher's copy of this unit. We did get a question asking if this unit is available in Spanish yet, and it is not available in Spanish yet. The respect unit is being worked on, so they're being done in the order they're presented. So after the respect unit, it will be ready for translation in the not only in Spanish, but we also have someone working on Portuguese. So hopefully those will all be up for everyone to download, and then we'll get into other languages trying to get these out to you and as fast as we can, but we want them accurate too. And the people that work on these do a really great job in what they're doing. So we're going to pick up here. We left off on page 11, but we want to go back to page 10. And if you can put your finger there on page 10, of course, we're right in between two procedures, but the two procedures tie in together. So we're going to go back and just quickly read procedure 5, and then we're going to read procedure 6, because that's where we're going to be tonight. But we want to remind ourselves of the last part of procedure 5. And it says, discuss as a class what some of their responsibilities are. Guide class discussion by asking students how they think they learn to be responsible for these duties. Accept as many answers as time permits, and have students turn to page 9 of their handbooks and read the section entitled, How is Responsibility Learned? And we'll discuss that a little bit more as we go on. Allow students time to do the corresponding exercise on page 10. And when you look over to page 10, you'll see there was 3 questions, A, B, and C. So we're going to address those, but that ties into page 11 through 13, which is procedure 6, which is the do's and don'ts of responsibility. So looking here at procedure 6, which is where we're going to be tonight, tell students that an important aspect of being responsible is to know the do's and don'ts of responsibility. Have students turn to pages 11 through 13 and read the section, The Do's and Don'ts of Responsibility. Explain that being responsible includes not only completing the task, but also completing it in the way they were instructed and with a positive attitude. And of course, you always, not always, but David likes to bring that sign that shows attitude, and it's really great to be reminded of that. We all have certain things that we repeatedly do and we pick on each other about it, but we all know they're necessary. And it's always great. And in fact, if we could put up the first slide, I didn't have one as pretty as David, so I had to create one here. Of course, our attitude, remember, is just like our character. It's either going to be positive or negative. And of course, that's going to determine a lot of how we even begin to initiate an action. And remember, it starts with a thought process, and we're going to talk about that thought process tonight. But remember that our attitude's either going to be positive or negative, and that's really going to determine whether we're a person that's going to be responsible or irresponsible. When we look at something with a negative attitude, even though we might go ahead and do what needs to be done, most likely it won't turn out the way it's supposed to. It's when we see the necessity behind getting things done, it usually turns out, we find out it's not as bad as we think it is, and it actually becomes a better job is usually done. But looking over to page 10, this was the last part of procedure 5, and it said list some things you are responsible for. And of course, as we talked about, different people will have different things. You could have a person who has an elderly grandparent in the house, and of course they might assist with that person. You could have someone that has a sibling or a parent that is disabled. You could have someone that has a parent that has a terminal illness. You could have someone that lives in a household where they have to work to also have to help to pay the bills. There's so many different aspects you can throw into this, but we always think of the ideology of everybody lives in a household with mom and dad and plenty of food, and the lights are always on. The house is warm in the winter and cool in the summer. And that's not reality. In fact, if you've seen the news article that came out today that said the average American for their basic needs is coming up $11,000 short a year. Now, that's basic needs. I didn't get to see the list of what was classified as basic needs in that study. Hopefully it's not 2 cars in every garage and cable TV and, all of the aspects that we think we need. Hopefully it's the true needs and something honestly can be evaluated about that. But here we have things that you are responsible for. And think about that for yourself. And of course, when you have students reply to these things, this is one where you want to let them voluntarily speak, because you never know what's going on in someone's house, and you never want someone to say something they feel will embarrass them. So you really want them to volunteer things. And a lot of times you'll find out as a teacher, people will come talk to you after class, and they'll say, I wanted to really say something, but I didn't want to say it in front of everybody. And they'll have input they want to give too. And you'll find out that occurs a lot in peaceful solution classes. And of course, when you hear what they have to say, you understand why. Because people can be really harsh on other people these days in society and be really cruel and have no empathy or understanding about what people are going through. So have them list these, these activities or responsibilities they have. And of course, you see the answers could vary, but include getting up in the morning on time, doing chores, completing homework assignments, and not being late for appointments. And then here you see the second one was, how do you think you were taught to be responsible for these duties? And of course, the answers could vary, but your parents could set an example before you in the things that they are responsible for. They also taught you by giving you tasks, giving you certain deadlines to work with, and specific times to do chores. That's one thing I remember, and I've never been able to develop this ability, but I remember growing up, my parents were always up by 5:30, and you very rarely heard an alarm clock go off. They would be up before the alarm clock would go off, and they'd just turn it off. And that was something, my dad always said it was because he worked on a farm growing up milking cows, and he just got used to it. And of course, I've never developed, I have to set an alarm clock or I won't get up at 5:30. So that's something that I haven't developed the ability to do that yet. But it goes to show you that there's a lot of people that have this set in them that they can do these things. They make habits and they create these habits and they're able to do these things. Now, of course, they don't stay up till midnight every night either. They go to bed at a decent time. That's part of being responsible. When you need to get up early, you need to go to bed early if you expect to do a great job the next day. And of course, here the last question we had was, what would occur if you choose to be irresponsible and leave your duties undone? Now, you see the answers could vary, but someone else would have to do them. Sometimes people don't think that sounds too bad. Well, I didn't have to do it. I got out of it. Or you will suffer the consequences for not completing your tasks, such as low grade, being late for an appointment, or being grounded. When you think about these things, when you do these things as a young person and you think you can get by with them, you'll find once you get into the workforce, you're going to lose one job after another job after another job. I've read the classifieds when I was growing up. I hardly ever look at a newspaper anymore. Back then, it was kind of common to get a newspaper. Every day you go into the service station or you'd get one from the man on the corner. Or you had these little machines, you just put your money down, pull it down, pull your paper out. And every day we'd go through those. And I would always read the classifieds just for interest. And all the time I remember reading classifieds where people were paying to try to find workers. I never, ever, ever remember someone saying looking for someone irresponsible. It just wasn't there. Top pay for the most irresponsible individual I can find. You'll never find that. And of course, these things, remember, they're taught and they're learned. And these things are as true as the sun coming up and the sun going down. If you have a bad example in front of you, you're most likely going to follow that bad example unless someone else can show you a better way. And that's done many times when parents don't fulfill these jobs. That's done through teachers, guidance counselors, grandparents. Somebody else steps in. Remember, we covered what it means to be a role model. It's someone that can set the example of the right thing to do, a positive role model. So looking over here to page 11, the do's and don'ts of responsibility. Well, first we're going to cover the do's, and then we'll get to the don'ts. But it says if you listed chores, homework, or even taking care of a pet as some of your responsibilities, then you're on the right track. Or then you're right on target. In other words, I need to be responsible for an eye appointment here soon. All of these responsibilities are age appropriate. In other words, you have both the mental and physical capabilities of successfully completing these tasks. Being responsible, however, does not mean only completing the task. It also includes completing the task within the time given, and think about that, how important that is. As a child, we don't really consider that. Well, I'll clean my room tomorrow, Mom. I got all day tomorrow to do it. And imagine if you go in there, that night and you're like, okay, I'm ready for supper. Well, I figured I'd wait till tomorrow too. We just won't eat anything tonight. I kind of ate a big lunch today, so I'm not really hungry. Could you imagine how the child would feel? Well, I need food. Well, I need you to clean your room too, but we're going to put that off, so we'll just put this off too. You see, you get into this tit for tat and it doesn't solve any problems. But notice here, it says, in other words, you have both the mental and physical capabilities of successfully completing these tasks. That means the mental, the thought process, the desire, the attitude that comes with it, the determination. All of these things are positive character traits that will help build up this mental capacity. Remember, it's a teaching. That's how our mentality, when we want to fortify it, we want to strengthen it, we want to make it stronger to be able to support more tasks at hand, we have to do that through education. And it's more than just 1 + 1 is 2, or learning to read poetry, or other things of that point. We're talking about things of character, things of interaction, things that require us to be able to see something and bring it to something better, or to bring something to completion. So being responsible, however, does not mean only completing the task. It also includes, notice, completing the task within the given time, having a positive attitude, and doing it as you are instructed. And that's probably one of the most important things that a responsible person will do, is they will do things as they are instructed. And it's very important, especially as a child or a young adult. Sometimes we think we know a lot, and I'm speaking from my own self. We think we know and understand a lot as a child or as a young teenager, and we think we understand the outcome of many things, but we really don't know how complicated life is yet. And a lot of time, children think life seems so simplistic. That's what I did. I thought, this is all easy. You go to work, you come home, you pay the bills. You go to work, you come home, you pay the bills. And I finally realized that's not even the kind of life I want to live. I don't want to go to work, come home, and hand my money off to everybody else. But that's kind of the rigmarole, as they say. That's the way that we all get into in society. And almost, I would say, in a lot of people's lives, their examples of their parents' responsibility is getting up every day, going to work, getting off at the end of the week, and taking their whole check and paying their bills because they're so far in debt, they get to go turn around and do it again the next week. And then they do it again the next week. And responsibility just becomes paying your debt on time. And really, when you think about it, when you bury yourself that far in, that's not being very responsible to begin with. There's a thing called financial responsibility. But then you're also considering, as a child, there's so many implications that take place in adults' life. You don't think about, as a child, when you're sick, you stay at home. You stay at home, you rest, you do whatever needs to be done. Well, as a parent or an adult, you get sick, you stay at home too. But you don't get paid for staying at home. No one sends the check in the mail because you didn't make it to work that day. And there's a lot of things that children don't tend to compute, and they think that everything is just going to be okay. Well, it can be with the right attitude and the right ethic, put forth positive attitude, and of course this responsibility. But doing things as we are instructed to do, that's part of learning responsibility. And if you don't have that underlined, I would underline doing it as you are instructed, and put in parentheses, this is part of learning, because responsibility must be taught. And when do we quit learning? You never quit learning. You're always learning how to be a better person, how to be a more responsible person. And a lot of that can change even with society itself. Technology is continually changing. There's a lot of things that really, really change immensely compared to what they were when I was a child. I was just standing at the store the other day, had my phone in my hand, and of course I tend to use Apple Pay a lot, and I had my wallet open on my Apple Pay, and of course all of a sudden it wanted me to click twice, and if I had, I would have paid the person's bill that was standing in front of me, because my phone read the meter when they, or the machine, whenever they went to tally their bill up, and I'm thinking, but I'm glad, I don't let, people just tend to push side button twice, click, click. Oh, it just dinged. That must have worked okay. And you don't realize you're spending money. You don't know how much you just spent, but you're spending it. But part of this responsibility is every instruction that we have, we make sure we read them, make sure we understand them. And it always helps to write them down. When someone gives you an instruction, and especially in a student-teacher relationship, if the teacher tells you something, write it down carefully. And if the teacher tells you to do something wrong, and I don't mean morally wrong, I mean that the teacher tells you to do something, then they come back and go, no, I didn't want you to do it that way. And you can always say, well, this is what I wrote down. And the key to it is when someone gives you an instruction, this is what a teacher I had always had me do. And he was a teacher for me and both my brothers. And it was well known, when he gave you an instruction, write it down and then repeat back to him what he told you. And he would tell you yes or no. And then sometimes he would change it, and that would be fine. But the whole point of trying to do something for someone else is you want to make sure you do exactly what you were instructed to do. Because there's a lot of times we can get off in wanting to do things our own way. And as you grow older, you realize in life, a lot of times, it's not just someone asking you. Sometimes people are paying you to do things the way they want it done. And you have to be very careful to follow those instructions. And once again, that's part of learning responsibility. And following instructions is most likely the most important part of this. But continuing on, it says, for example, you are responsible for completing your homework and turning it in the next day. What would occur if you turned in your assignment 3 days late with grape juice spilled on it, and most of it wrong because you didn't take the time to do it right? The likelihood is that you would get a poor grade and a lecture about doing your assignments correctly, neatly, and on time. So it's not so bad when you're a teenager. It's a little bit different when you get older and the responsibilities change. Well, here's a list of some do's and don'ts of responsibility. Number 1, do's. Do have a positive attitude about your duties. No matter what they are, and no matter how much you don't want to do them, see the benefit in doing them. And a lot of times you find out it's really not that bad. Once you get into it and once you start getting it done, it's usually not as bad as we think it is. And in my profession, there's some things that I have to do. I restore sometimes very, very old furniture, 200 and 300 years old. And sometimes I see jobs that are coming my way, and I detest them. I don't even want to look at them. I'm like, I just know it's not going to be fun. Because back in those days, they used to use horse hair and pig hair and cotton and grass and hay and straw. That's what they used for padding. And I'm allergic to it for one. My sinuses doesn't like 150-year-old dust. But still, someone's paying me to do something, and all of the things that are there are very perfectly acceptable to use. And it's just sometimes I have to talk myself into doing it. But even though I've been doing this for 34, 35 years, it's never as bad as I think it is. And I still tell myself every time I go to pick one up, like, I would I didn't have to do this thing. But it usually doesn't end up being that bad, and that's the thing. When you're building things, especially if you're being paid for it, you have to learn to remind yourself, I'm being paid to do the best I can with this. Because if your attitude's bad, the job's usually bad. Same thing with our classwork assignments as children. Same thing as a teacher. If you walk into the classroom and you think, this is the worst class of the day, that's going to be the worst class of the day. You've already got your mindset for it. But once again here, about our duties, and no matter what duty we have an auditorium full of people, and everybody had a duty today. And I'm not asking you, don't jump up and raise your hand or shout it out, but how many people had a positive outlook about what they did today? And how many people had a negative outlook about what they did today? And of course, you see how it affects the day. You see how you affect other people. All of these things actually are part of our society, this chemistry that makes things move forward or it halts them, can shut them down sometimes completely. But it really revolves around a positive attitude. And of course, a positive attitude toward your duties, it shows maturity on your part. Instead of looking at chores as a waste of time or a drudgery, be glad that you're given an opportunity to contribute to your household. By doing your chores, you help your family members. Doing homework or class projects is your opportunity to learn and increase your knowledge. And of course, you see here, knowledge is power. And that's something we should remind ourselves with. And if you don't have it written down, which is, we're just getting to it, so you might not, but we talked a lot about it before we got here, you'll find that we use that term, knowledge is power, in two sections of the Peaceful Solution. One is on page 11 of the acceptance unit. The other one is page 11 of the responsibility unit. And of course, I want to go back and read to you what we covered on page 11 of the acceptance unit. If we can go ahead and go to the next slide. And this was what we've seen. This is, once again, page 11 of the acceptance unit, chapter 1, and it was entitled Knowledge is Power. And it said, taking your education seriously is another way you can demonstrate that you are a unique individual with moral potential. You have a responsibility. Now, we told everyone when we read that, when you go back and look, you should have that underlined. We said we're going to talk more about that word responsibility when we get there. And now we're finally there. But you have a responsibility to continuously pursue positive moral ways to improve yourself. So notice, we have a responsibility to continue to improve, educate, learn to do things in a better way. That's part of our responsibility. Getting a sound education is one way you can do this. In addition to your basic subjects, English, social studies, mathematics, and science, a sound moral education will assist you in being aware of what is going on in your community, nation, and world. And of course, remember what morals are. They're rules. They're rules. They're there to guide us. And remember, those rules keep us safe. And we had that dividing line of morality that we read about on page 8 of the character unit. And it's important to tie all of these things together, that we have a moral responsibility. That means within the rules, to do it the right way, to educate ourselves on how the keeping of these rules benefit not only ourselves, but our community, our nation, and our world. And that's the power that a person can truly have. You know, a great teacher one time said that knowledge is having the ability to know what's right. Wisdom is applying the knowledge that you've learned of what's right. So to be a person that has wisdom, that's applying the knowledge that you've learned. And it's very important, because you can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you don't use wisdom in making decisions, it's not worth very much. And we'll look into that also here shortly. But continuing on, it says that they pay attention to influences around them. Remember page 68 about influences in the character unit. They gather all of the facts, then test and prove what is correct before making a decision. And remember even chapter 4 of the acceptance unit, when choosing a friend, our decisions don't have to be very rapid. Now, there's some things you need to decide. If you're waiting in line to order your food, you pretty much need to decide what you want. You can't hold up the line for 3 or 4 hours while you're deciding. But when you're talking about a decision that affects your life, you really want to consider what it is you're doing, because one decision is built on the next decision, which is built on the next decision and the next decision. And sadly, some of these decisions we make, no matter how sweet of a person you are, how kind of a person you are, how humorous of a person you are, sadly, that won't determine whether our choices either cause us bodily harm or even death. And that's the scary part about this, is whenever we're making the right choice, someone else's bad choice can affect us. You know, like you talk about with responsible drinking and driving. When many times you can read in the news where people go out drinking, driving, not being responsible for what they're doing, and someone innocent gets caught up into it. And you think about how all of these things tied together, all you can do is your very best to do your part. And that's really all you can do. And hopefully in educating society, people will choose to make better choices. But once again, gather all of the facts and then prove it to be correct. Ironically, many teens report that youths who are smart are picked on. They often are called nerds or geeks. Hey, as hurtful as those names might be, what is even worse is neglecting your education. Be smart, studious, and aware of what is going on around you. People who are informed and determined to maintain a positive moral character will not jeopardize their safety, health, or future. And the goal is to have a future. And that comes from keeping the rules, these rules that keep us safe, these rules that protect us, and they guide us, and they can really help us into having a much more peaceful life. But sadly in society, and you see this a lot in the news, some of the most brilliant minds, you ever heard, well, there's another Albert Einstein right there. You think about some of the most brilliant minds that society has recognized and some of the smartest people. If we could go to the next slide, these are the things that they come up with. Now that's scary when the smartest people in the world come up with things that destroy in a massive amount. In fact, it's so large we don't even know how large it is. And I want you to consider, when you talk about the do's and don'ts of responsibility, and I only bring this up because of what we see in the news today, and it's very important to educate children about this. They shouldn't wait till another Hiroshima or Nagasaki takes place, like in Japan in 1945. That shouldn't have to take place for us to educate how bad this can get, because we're in a much worse situation than what we were in the 1940s. We're in a situation where things like we just showed on the monitor is considered acceptable, where military leaders are saying that it won't affect the earth as much as people are saying. But yet there's scientific studies showing that it affects everybody. And then when you have countries who have, Russia has 4,400 plus, the United States has 4,100 plus, China is getting ready to go into the 2,000 plus, and you have France and Germany, and then you throw in Italy, and then you throw in North Korea, and of course Israel supposedly has them. They know they're in Turkey, but of course they're U.S., which Turkey is selling weapons to Russia right now. I mean, it's just one big mess. But there's a lot of money in it. But the responsibility, who's responsible for these things? Because you know who's going to bear the results of it if one gets dropped? And in today's society, it won't be just one that gets dropped. It was only one that got dropped at a time in Japan because Japan didn't have one to drop back. Now, you can exchange missiles. It's proven that you can exchange missiles and have nuclear war in less than an hour. And that's a scientific fact. It's literally brought out in the news continually how fast these countries can respond to each other. And that's a very scary part, because here leaders are supposed to be responsible. And right now, the United States is spending $1 trillion updating its nuclear weaponry. Now, what can we do to change that? Well, first, I think if we could have had the people that suffered in Japan, if they were the ones to make decisions on nuclear bombs, we could probably have eradicated nuclear bombs by now. But for some reason, we've decided, since it looks like Japan surrendered very quickly, and now they do what we tell them to do, this is what we'll do to everybody. And of course, that's what this, as we started out in the peaceful solution by saying you can't force someone to be positive. Well, in today's society, you're not even forcing them to be positive. You're just forcing them to do what you want them to do, whether it's positive or negative. And that's the scary part, because this is what our children are growing up into. And as teachers, remember, the minds that are ruling nations today, they were being shaped and molded by teachers 20, 30, 40 years ago. And this decision-making was long before the decisions were made. They were taught and put into the minds of people. A person doesn't just wake up one day and think, this is what we should do. There's a training process, an educational system that promotes these things. And that's why the peaceful solution is saying morality has been left out of education, and the responsibility of what we need to do to make a society better is pretty much evaporated. And you would say you want to get, peace back into society, but really you want to get it into society. It's hard to put something back we've been building on nuclear weapons for many years now. But when you think about these opportunities and these chores and this drudgery that we just talked about and having a positive attitude, when you look at the decision making on a global scale, and it's important to have your classroom look at these things, how they're affected outside of their community. If they only see what's in front of them, they're never going to be successful in life. They have to see everything that's going on to understand we're a very interactive world. We're a very, interdependent. When we talk about interdependency, it's never been more predominant as it is today. When you go into a store, it's very rare you're buying something in the United States. It's made in the United States. It's coming from somewhere else. And we really depend on everything and everybody. And we learned that with COVID, of how when one thing breaks down, the whole supply chain breaks down. Well, morality has broken down. The responsibility has broken down to where you really wonder, and I'm not here to bash any political leaders, whether it be in the United States or Russia or China, North Korea, Iran, anybody. I mean, I listen to world leaders that from South America. I listened to speeches here not long ago to where the United States made marijuana legal, and look at the money that's being made in taxes. We should legalize cocaine. Why? Because they have an enormous amount of cocaine to sell, and they want to send it into the markets. And the United States has collected a lot of tax money. And the scientific reports come out again this last week showing that marijuana prohibits the ability to learn. So it's not, how much money is it worth to dumb down society, to prohibit society from moving forward? It's not a very smart thing to do, and I'm not here to advocate the selling or not selling of drugs, but anything that brings harm to yourself, someone else, or the environment, you shouldn't do it. If you're going to take something that's going to slow down your thought capacity, which is every action begins with a thought, and it slows it down, it confuses it. I think the people that make the decisions to legalize things that do that must be doing it themselves. That's the only kind of person that would go, hey, that's not a bad idea. Either that or they're invested in a dispensary, and that's what brings it forth. Well, think about that today. Those of you that are 50, 60, 40, think about what was it like if you would have got caught with marijuana when you were in your 20s. And today, hey, it's perfectly legal. Nothing wrong with it. So are we going in the right direction? Because this is what these children that are coming out of school, now they're into a vaping, marijuana, and everything else. And all of these things are proven to be negative on the body. To the point, the last presentation we went and done at a school down in the valley of South Texas, the school requested it be on vaping and the dangers of vaping and how much vaping is destroying the lungs. That's how much of a problem that these things are in society. But you can't tell them to not do it if you're doing it right in front of them. That's the part of not being responsible. So this attitude, this positive attitude, is looking at everything with the right ideology and the right perspective. And of course, it comes down to, well, who says who's right and who's wrong? Just very simplistic once again. If it brings harm to yourself, someone else, or the environment, we should all have the attitude, if it's going to cause harm, we're not going to do it. It should be a benefit. Everything we do should be a benefit to someone else, and not just to ourselves all the time. If you look at the next slide, we finished page 11 of the acceptance unit with your mind is precious, don't waste it. That would include doing anything that prohibits you from learning, anything that slows down the mind from comprehension of things that we need to be a benefit to society. Looking back here on page 11, though, with this knowledge is power, notice it says, do make every effort to do exactly what you have been instructed to do. Notice make every effort. Now, there can come times, and of course, as a child, it seems a little bit more dramatic than as an adult sometimes. It can be that way as an adult too. But sometimes the smallest things will come up and you might not know how to get it done. And I tell you, I was given a job one time of putting turkeys in a freezer at a first job I had at a restaurant, huge walk-in freezer. And so I go into the freezer and I start uncasing them and I start sticking them everywhere like I was told to do. And when I got done, I realized no one told me how to get out. I didn't know how to open the freezer door to get back out. And I immediately thought, man, they should have told me how to get out of this thing. And then I realized I probably should have asked, hey, when that door shuts, how do I get out? And even though that would have sounded fairly stupid, to somebody that's opened and shut the door many, many times, to someone that's never done it before, I must have fought with that door for 5 minutes before I figured it out. And after I figured it out, I realized it's just as simple as some doors you push, some doors you pull, and some handles you push, some handles you pull. And that's the way it goes. It was really that simple. And I didn't, in fact, there's probably only a couple people watching that know that story. But it's not something I was very pleased with, and I didn't go bragging about it once I got out of the freezer either. I was really humiliated that I got stuck in the freezer that long. But no one ever asked to see where I was at, so everybody must have thought I was working hard back there. But, I want to emphasize, whenever we ask someone to do a job, because notice it's saying do exactly as you've been instructed to do. A lot of times in society, what we fail to do is give instruction. We just expect. And there's a lot of time, I know here in our community, there's a lot of people, you just ask them to help and they'll jump in and help. And if you don't instruct how you want it done a certain way, you really shouldn't complain if they don't do it the way you want it done. Because a lot of people will just jump in and help, and of course you do it the way that you know how to do it. And then some people might not know how to do it, they just want to help, and they don't even know the importance of why it should be done this way or that way. So instruction, when we say that make every effort to do exactly what you've been instructed to do, as teachers, is to make sure we actually give instructions on what we want done, and we're very clear with those instructions. And of course, that's what makes everything work hand in hand. And it could be something, I remember a great teacher I had. He would say, hey, let's go do this and go do that and let me know how it works. And we'd go do it exactly as we were told to do and call and, well, I don't think it went too well. All right, well, we know that don't work. Mark that off the list. We won't do that again. So, okay, we move on to the next thing. But the point was, it was something that he knew it wasn't going to work to begin with. But he wanted us to see this won't work. Because usually we were the ones saying, hey, can we go try this, this, and this? Oh, yeah, go ahead. And try this, this, and this. And we thought, oh, we're on the right path. But a lot of times he was using it as a tool to teach us that's not going to work. And you're going to need to see why it won't work. And we had a lot of seeing why it won't work, and one thing that you learn is that, well, there's two things. One, it's easier to lie to someone than convince someone they've been lied to. That's a statement that has proven to be true longer than, I don't know what you can measure that with. And another one is, the one thing that I think I've learned, I know some of the instructors have in the Peaceful Solution, it's easier to teach someone something is wrong and be patient with their learning than to just tell them it's wrong. Because sometimes you close the mind immediately to someone that, no, that's not wrong. There's nothing wrong with it. This is what I want to do. It's a lot easier to teach them that it's wrong, but you have to be patient in the teaching. And one thing we had was a teacher that taught us to see these things, very patient, and taught us to see how they're wrong without just saying, that's wrong, don't do it. Literally taught us to see it. And didn't make it, sometimes it was pretty expensive to learn that it was wrong. But it was something that was needed, and very much appreciated now. And it's continued. It still continues to this day, that same process. But continuing on here with, this is number 2. A responsible person will do everything within his power to do exactly as he or she has been instructed. Knowing that you did what you were told will give you a sense of accomplishment. So the next time you clean your room, don't throw your clothes under the bed or hide a pile of miscellaneous junk in the closet, Make every effort to do your duties right the first time. By not having to redo your work, you will save a lot of time and frustration for yourself and others. So once again, just taking the time to do it right. If you're one of these people, and I've been one of these people where you open up a box to put something together, first thing you do is, oh, there's instructions. Poof. And you spend 35 minutes trying to do something, and then the last thing you do is go find the instructions. Because it's like, oh, how does this thing go together anyway? You think this would be easy. I can put this together. And then you waste, 30 minutes to an hour of your life realizing, no, I can't. That's why they gave me instructions. That's probably pretty important. I remember being told if you take instructions out of the box, you throw them away, you got pride. You need to learn how to follow instructions. And that's a very true statement too. But continuing on here, it says, if you have to do it, then do it right. And there's a lot of things we have to do. We might not like it, but you have to do it. And you can ask your class. You ask things. What are things you have to do that you don't like doing, but you have to do. I've heard a lot of people say brush their teeth. You think it's not important until man, my teeth are falling out. And you can be someone diligent with that, and still genetics can get you. It's not always just brushing. But here with number 3, it says do your responsibilities before doing other things. In other words, do the things you must do before the things you want to do. This is called prioritizing. When you prioritize, you consider what the most important thing is that needs to be done, and you do that first. For example, your mother asked you to start the laundry, but you really want to read your new book. The responsible person would start the laundry first, then read the book. And prioritizing is something, that's where we have to be careful that we're not always putting ourselves first. A lot of times you find it's much better to put the things you have to do for other people first, because you're always going to get around to yourself. And I don't mean absorb yourself into doing so much for other people you never get to do the things for yourself, because that can be easily done also. You can easily spend all of your time dealing with other situations and not take care of the very simple things that you need to do. But throughout the day, always consider, well, this is mine, but everybody has to have what they call my time. That's time where you have to take care of things you need to do. And a responsible person has that. And it can be hard if you have a lot of responsibilities, especially if you're dealing with things on a global scale. My time could be the time when you close your eyes and you're asleep, and then you wake up, your my time is done. That can be it sometimes, but that's a sign you need other people to help you do jobs. And, here we're really thankful because we have the people that will step up and do those jobs, and a lot of people get involved. And sometimes it's just recognizing how big or how small the job is at hand and getting it done. But this prioritizing, there's some things that you need to do now and some things that can wait. If you use a wood stove here in West Texas, when it gets cold, you probably want to go ahead and have your wood chopped, split, and ready to go. You don't want to wait till, when spring comes, it'll be nicer. I'll do it in the spring. Well, that was great if you did it last spring, but it's not too great if you did it this spring. So it's one of those things where if your house has a leak, you probably want to get it worked on. You don't want to wait till it rains real hard and go, I knew I should have fixed that. That doesn't work too well. But it's also with responsibilities of, if there's something you want to do, but you're responsible for something else, like there's a locked door, and you want to go do something, but you're supposed to unlock the door at 5. But it's, I'll get it when I'm done, so I'll show up at 7 and unlock it. What if 2 people stand outside that locked door for 2 hours waiting on you? That's something where you're actually, just think, the peaceful solution would teach you're actually stealing from those people. You're also stealing from the area that was supposed to be there to perform the work that's at hand. And, imagine the success of your business if you're supposed to be, let's say you go to work, your store opens up at 7 a.m. and your customers see your sign, 7 a.m. And you decide one day, I'm my own boss, I own this place, I'll do what I want to do. I think I'll go in at 9. And imagine your customers there at 7:05. People aren't going to wait for 2 hours for you. They're going to go find the next greatest, latest thing so they can do what they need. You know, it's the same thing. If you don't find something one place, what do? You go to the next place to find it. So all of these things, we expect people to be responsible. You know, could you imagine if you went through a fast food restaurant that serves hamburgers and you got home, well, go to eat your hamburger and I don't have a hamburger. You know, I got lettuce, tomato, mayonnaise, but I don't even have any meat in this sandwich. And I didn't really feel like it. You know, I figured it'd be healthier for you just to do without this time. Well, that might be that person's opinion, but that's not what you paid for. You know, but you get into these things. What is prioritizing? Well, part of it is following the instructions the way that we're told to do them, and then doing the things that need to be done in that order first. Well, here continuing on, it says, life is more than doing what you want to do. Life is about doing what you need to do. You know, and of course, there's a huge difference between our needs and our wants, and that can be a very challenging thing in figuring that out in even our own lives. You know, it's like these things. You know, I really need a new phone. And you get a new phone, and then the next year you see, oh, there's the next one coming out. It's the phone 45. I need that one now. Why? What does it do? I have no idea, but I need it. It's got titanium, they say. Well, what does that do for it? I have no idea. But, you know, and you think that, people aren't that gullible. There's a couple of companies that are making money every year just by bringing out something different every year. You know, and it's funny because when you update your phone, you're like, oh, I'm operating on the same system. What did you know? You know, camera's a little better, or this is a little better, but it's the same system in this phone as it was the other phone. You know, so this one's just as confusing as the last. But there's a difference between needs and wants. You know, if there's something that you need, you should get it. You need the peaceful solution. You need the books. You need an education in morality. We need an education in morality. Not everybody needs a Ferrari, a Porsche, a Corvette. Not everybody needs a mansion. You know, not everybody wants to get on a ship and take a ride to space for 3 minutes for $2 billion. Not everybody wants to buy a yacht that's 400 plus foot long. Not everybody wants to do that, and no one needs to do that. But what we need to do is to learn how to reason, solve problems like Gaza, like we see at the South Korea-North Korea border, like we see taking place at the southern border of the United States, like we see taking place in southern Sudan and Sudan, Somalia and Kenya. All of these things, Libya, all of these countries, even when you throw in Venezuela. You know, Venezuela, just 40 years ago, was the third richest country in the world. And today, they're the third poorest country in the world. But yet, they have the largest oil reserve. And when you talk about prioritizing, you know, we always try to use things so your students can see outside of their little communities, because they're going to be working with people outside of their little communities. They're going to interact. That's just the way things are done in our technological society. And when you talk about things you need compared to things you want, in the United States, we're a society that is based on wants, not based on needs. But there's other societies, they're based on needs. And I always try to, when I travel, and I'm very blessed in my job, I get to travel a lot of places. And I always try to learn something that people do that have needs and they don't get to fulfill their wants. I always want to see what is something they do. And usually you learn a lot of things from people like that. You know, and one thing that I learned recently was people that don't have much, can't afford a soda. They'd never drink a soda, no money to buy a soda. You know, they drink what they call panela water, or agua panela. And it's basically boiled water and sugar cane. And I thought, I got to try that. So I bought some, I brought it back, and I drank it, and I like, this is actually pretty great. This is better than any soda I've ever had. You know, because I like yams, and it tastes just like yams with brown sugar. And I'm like, I could enjoy this. But if I had to drink it every day, it wouldn't be so enjoyable. It's something new to me, so I enjoy it. But you think about people that they have needs and they don't even have their needs met. You look at people in Africa that are living off next to nothing, don't even have adequate water supply, all of these things. And it's important to get children, adults, to understand the difference between a need and a want. That's very, very important because that will help society become more responsible. But here, number 4, it says, do your best regardless of who you're doing it for. For example, you do great work for your teacher, but when there's a substitute, you goof off and hand in poor work. Or you might be quick to do something your aunt asked you to do, but refuse to do the same for your uncle. A responsible person would do his best all the time. It shouldn't matter if you're doing it for someone who is important to you or not. And when you think about that, the responsible people, let's say you have a really great teacher and your teacher's not there at that time. Does that mean you can slack off and not do as well as your teacher would expect you to do? No, because, eventually your teacher comes back and checks on you. And you want to make sure that you've done a great job, that you're at least doing the very best you can do with the instructions you were given. And that's what we should all want to do, and that's what being a responsible person is. But if your teacher gives you an instruction, and then you start slacking on that instruction, and then you start changing it because I always thought it'd be easier to do it this way. Sooner or later somebody comes back, and you don't want to come back, and the house is already complete, and it's like, but I thought I told you not to do it that way. That's not what I asked you to do. I need you to take that back apart. Sometimes in society it's called, no, I'm just going to have to get somebody else. You're fired. And that's the scary part because that's part of society. Losing jobs sometimes costs lives too. But remember, part of being responsible is doing it no matter who you're doing it for, whether it's the teacher you like or the teacher you don't like, whether it's the boss man you like or the boss man you don't like. That's the thing you have to remember. Who are you doing it for? You're always in a servitude. You're always helping, other people. That's what life is all about. Whether it's food service or any kind of other service, it's an act of servitude, and that's very important to have a caring and compassionate attitude when doing it. Then continuing on, notice here it says responsibility is doing what you know you should do, even when there's no one watching over your shoulder and telling you what to do. And that's the same thing we found out about self-control. Self-control is doing the right thing even when no one else is watching. Well, being responsible is, and this is very important, when I grew up working in a restaurant, I remember seeing hamburgers being dropped on floors many, many times, and the first thing people would do was look around to see who was looking, slap it back together, and then send it out. And I thought, man, I tell you what, I would hate to eat this stuff. But it wasn't even thought about. It was just something that was done. People moving so fast, hit the floor, but then you think, what are other things that people cut corners in doing? Eventually, they're going to affect someone. So do everything. Do it to the best of your ability. Even if someone is not watching you, do it the way you know it should be done. In number 5 here, it says, don't take any assignment or duty you're given. Do take any assignment or duty you're given seriously and complete what you start. That's probably one of the most challenging things you'll face even growing up. Your responsibilities are important for your growth and development. Learning to follow through on task is the mark of a responsible person. Although it might be hard to believe, taking out the garbage, making the bed, mowing the lawn, and completing school assignments are preparing you for the future. People who learn the value of responsibility as children grow up to be responsible adults. And it's, one example I've seen out here, we have, in the city we live in, there's a group that do road work as far as mowing grass and stuff. Every city has their city workers. And we have some of the best out here. Everything is manicured extremely well. But for some reason, my own yard, it's just never gets weed eated. It's just the righty mower, whatever it gets, and the rest grows. And I always thought when I was growing up, my dad would make us get out and we'd eat first, and then he would let us mow. But we were never allowed to do that. But you don't realize how much you appreciate everything done very well. But when you can see it, and around here we get to see it, things are done really neatly, and you appreciate when someone, it might seem like a small thing, but when you're driving on country roads and the branches are hanging out and the grass is growing up here in West Texas and it's all hanging out in the road, you're really thankful, and it really just looks a lot better. And it helps reduce the rats and snakes and everything else that's crawling around because you've got a jungle you're living in. And you really become thankful for all of these little things. And there's other areas in our city that we live in here that you can see whether you're wanting to go, we have different areas to where if you need something, there's people that have stuff organized, things that other people threw away, actually. They have things organized down to the minute details so someone can come in and quickly get what they need and be on their way. And you tend to not think about all of the hard work that goes in just so you can have it easy. But in reality, the hard work you do so others can have it easy, other people should be doing the same hard work so you can have it easy in certain areas also. And when everyone puts forth that effort, everyone assist, and life becomes easier in certain aspects for everyone. It's only when someone just doesn't really have that positive attitude and the attitude is negative. And of course, that's what looking over here to page 13, because we get into the don'ts, and we'll just get into this, and William will be able to pick up and cover a lot more of this in the next class. But the very first one, notice, is don't approach your responsibilities with a negative attitude. Remember, it's either positive or it's negative, and having a positive attitude or a negative attitude isn't, man, I don't want to go do that today, but we got to go get it done. So having a negative attitude isn't just not wanting to do it, but you're still going to do it. It's one of those where, yeah, we'll do it, but yeah, if it holds together, it's done, and I don't care. Who cares how it turns out? We'll say we did it, and it's over with. Well, don't approach your responsibilities with a negative attitude. Why? Think about what you see in society today. Think about what's taking place in society today and what negative attitudes do. A negative attitude is something that brings harm to yourself, someone else, or the environment. A person who argues and fusses about doing chores or other duties lacks the maturity to see the value in contributing to the family's well-being. And remember what a value is. We learned that on page 6 of the character unit. It's something we deem to be important. Now, everyone should deem responsibility to be important. We should deem helping others and making others' lives easier. We should deem that to be important. Someone who complains about doing schoolwork lacks understanding of the value of education. People who complain about their responsibilities make life unpleasant for others and for themselves. For example, you are asked to supervise your younger brother for a short time. But since you had other plans, you began to argue and complain about always being the one to look after your younger brother. By arguing and complaining, you can upset your mother, or you could also make your younger brother feel that you don't care about him. And of course, talk about getting your mother upset. It comes with disappointment and all of these other things. So it's important that we listen to what we're told to do, and we gladly do what we're told to do as long as we're being asked to do something that is morally correct. And of course, don't do your duties halfway. Number 2 here. Leaving your duties undone or only partially done makes things harder on others. And if you've ever had the benefit of seeing someone partially do a repair or partially fix something, the one thing is when it's going away from you or you're going away from it, the one thing is job security. That's going to be back again one day. Or I'm going to be back here again one day fixing this because I just didn't do it right the first time. And sometimes it's a lot cheaper, even though we think we're cutting corners and we're going to rig it up a little bit, it's cheaper just to do it right the first time. Sometimes you do need to just make it last a little longer. And there's nothing wrong with that because that's what needs to be done. But you have to determine, of course, the purpose and objective of what you're trying to accomplish. So sometimes it's pretty acceptable to do that because you only need it for a little bit longer. And sometimes, you plan on using it for a while, you might want to fix it like you're going to use it for a while. But continuing on here, it says, someone who does not complete his task also deprives himself of knowing the satisfaction of a job well done. Always take the time to recheck your work. For example, if you are writing a book report, proofread it before you hand it in. If you are cleaning your room, give it one last glance to make sure nothing has been overlooked before you say you're done. So we're going to stop right here at this point. And you see that sweeping that under the rug, it makes you think of bad decisions sometimes that are swept under the rug, with politicians. And of course, we all see the results of it. But remember, in all of this, a responsible person takes hold of what they've been taught to do, and they do what they need to do. A responsible person also takes what's been taught to them, and they teach it to others. That's part of being responsible. If you're taught to do something, teach it to others. Help others be able to see the same thing that you're seeing with this positivity and this positive attitude. So we're going to stop right here on page 13. We're in the middle of procedure 6, and William will pick up next class. It'll be on 12/3 this coming Sunday at 5:30. Thank you once again for joining us.